Welcome back, my fellow peanuts, and welcome to anyone who is new to this podcast or to my channel. Now, this podcast covers true crime cases that may not be suitable for young listeners. Listener and viewer discretion is advised. Today, guys, you are not going to see the beagles because they are outside there, but you may, if they are, the echo cancellation should deter it, but you may or may not hear my little Charlotte going because she gets really upset when she's outside and she can see that I'm here and all that kind of stuff. You get to see Oscar and Frankie though, so I apologise. No beagle bites today. So I had a whole plan for this episode, and then I got sucked into watching Gone Girls, the Long Island serial killer. Now, let me tell you guys, long before I'd even watched the documentary, I'd watched quite a few on this particular man before he was identified. It's intrigued me that really a man could just keep killing along this coastline or this area and never be caught. And to be fair, for a fair while there, I wasn't entirely not sold on the fact that this might have been a police officer. So you'll have to bear with me because I think there was some thoughts processes that there was possibly a police officer involved, for me at least, when I initially sort of started watching these documentaries. I'm no conspiracy theorist, but boy, oh boy, oh boy, there was a hell of a lot of police corruption in this area in Suffolk County. Now, this is not me just saying this from the Netflix documentary. This has been long reported. It's absolutely insane to me how much these officers have done. Things that include a shooting and a beating of a cab driver while he was drunk. Another officer was found to have drugs in her car with her child in there. False testimony. Just the list goes on and on and on. And by the way, this goes from the top down the bottom. So much insanity going on. And no wonder they couldn't find a serial killer when they've got that much corruption going on. Like, seriously, guys, they're so focused on what's going on in-house, they're not focused on anything outside. Now, I may go off and absolutely again in this episode due to just once again a police department not caring for any of the victims, or it just frustrates me to no end that I constantly see this in all of my episodes where it involves sex workers. Who the hell do you think you are to justify that way of thinking? Like, honestly, women are missing. You blamed them for saying that they worked in a high-risk environment. Would you say the same to somebody who would defend your country? He or she chose this job and now they've gone missing? That's the job. Even worse, would you actually say it about a police officer as well? Because as far as I'm concerned, they have chosen a high-risk job as well. And the list just goes on and on about people not caring about young women who went missing and ended up dead. It just boggles my brain on how much they blame the victims, and they blamed them constantly. Getting distracted, once again, getting riled up before I've even started my episode. And whilst I know we've already done an episode about New York already, I do want to talk about this one in particular today. For this podcast, I'm not really going to be focusing so much on our suspected serial killer, but I want to focus on the girls and how their story sort of came about. But I will give you like a brief and run overview, whatever you want to call it. So this man who is being charged and a suspect is Rex Heuermann. He's been charged. He's yet to face any trial at this stage, which I suspect will lead me to a follow-up episode after that's happened. I don't want to give too much into his bio, but I will give you some really, really basics of the man. Rex was born and raised in Long Island. He attended Burner High School in Massaquoi Park, where his classmates described him as frequently he was targeted for bullying. This is all according to the New York Times. He pursued a career in architecture and established the firm RH Consultants and Associates in New York City in 1994. His firm's clients included prominent companies such as Target, American Airlines, and Foot Locker. So around the time of his arrest, he was 59 years old. He was about 20 or so minutes from Gilgo Beach, which is where most of the victims were found. He lived there with his wife, Essa, and his two children. Now, from the documentary in Netflix, I believe he actually lived in the home that he grew up in. My understanding, and again, guys, I'm not going to get too much into him because I really don't want to give him any airtime. But, and I know that's really, really bad considering I give so many of my serial killers airtime. This one also, he hasn't had a trial and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know enough to long say that he will be found guilty or anything like that. But I've got to say, guys, there was some real hard evidence. Like he was there. A lot of the witnesses said about the giant and said about his car, the Chevy. So there's a lot that aligns. His DNA is aligning. So I'm not saying he's not the killer. I'm just saying he hasn't had his fair trial. So I don't really want to give him too much. But several of his neighbours would actually say they were pretty surprised and they had a lot of belief. They really just didn't think he was capable. I mean, this is not the first time we're hearing about this with a serial killer. One of his neighbours actually said, we've been here for about 30 years and the guy's been quiet, never really bothers anybody. This is a very, very quiet neighbourhood. Everyone knows each other. All of our neighbours were really friendly. It's never been a problem. But what I will say, guys, is I found an article in which BTK actually said Rex reminded him a lot of him and that there was a lot of similarities, which if you go back and watch an episode, I'll put it up in the corner, guys, for you so that you can see the link. But there is a lot of similarities. There's a lot that definitely I would go, ooh, hang on, I'm seeing it too. So the killings were a series of murders of women on Long Island in New York. It spans from about 1993 up until 2011, where they sort of abruptly stop. Many of the victims' remains were found over a period in late 2010 and 2011. This was actually during a search of the Ocean Parkway, and they happened to find them in Gilgo Beach in Suffolk County in New York. 4 of the victims would end up being called the Gilgo 4. And the search was actually sparked by the disappearance of a Shannon Gilbert in early May 2001 in Oak Beach. She went missing from a gated community in the South Shore. She was very similar to a lot of the victims, and she worked as an escort. She advertised her services on Craigslist, and she went missing during an appointment. The really, really thorough investigation reveals that there's a lot of similarities between a lot of the victims. The suspect in this particular case, he sort of was known as the Long Island serial killer. It was also abbreviated to LISK. Apparently, he was also known as the Ripper, the Long Island serial Ripper. No arrest was actually officially made until 2023. But in December 2010, the remains of 4 victims would be named the Gilgo 4. They were found within a quarter of a mile of each other near the Gilgo Beach. 6 more sets of remains were actually found during 2011 in Suffolk and Nassau counties. Now, what they would believe was the remains that they found in 2011 would predate the 4 bodies that they had initially found in 2010. Shannon's body was finally found a year after the Gilgo 4 were discovered. They happened to be in a large marsh that was approximately 9 miles northeast of where 10 sets of remains had already been found. Now, there is speculation that she actually became lost in the marshland after escaping from an attack and died from exposure or an accidental drowning. She actually called 911 in a panic the night she disappeared. So there's a lot of controversy around Shannon's death in particular. I to and fro from it. I think she was pursued. I think there was possibly something that night that happened, but there's a lot that says she was really paranoid, or it's not very clear. But I would put her with the victims myself. I would put her with the victims. She was of the similar stature. She was an escort. She was in the same vicinity. She was in the same area. Whatever happened to Shannan, her family deserves some answers, and I think that the police need to look a lot closer at it. But anyway, so since July 2023, Rex, a Manhattan architect, and he was married in Long Island, has been charged with murdering a total of 7 women. So the Gilgo 4, which was Megan Waterman, Melissa Barthelemy, Amber Costello, and Maureen Brainard Barnes, Jessica Taylor, Sandra Costello, and Valerie Mack. The last charge was just in December 2024. So this December just gone, and I believe it was Valerie Mack. Whilst the story begins with an incredibly brave young woman, Shannon Gilbert, her mother didn't give up, and she would not let the police forget about her at all. A story begins far before that, though, but Shannan definitely triggered all this. But a story begins in 1993. Now, Sandra Costello was a 28-year-old woman from Trinidad and Tobago, who was killed in November at some point, either around November 19th or 20th in 1993. She was living in New York City at the time of her death or her disappearance, and her body was found in November 1993 by hunters. It's in a sort of wooded area in the North Sea in Long Island, and it's approximately 60 miles northeast of Gilgo Beach. Now, she is the earliest known victim of Rex, but it indicates that he possibly began killing before the 2000s, or possibly even earlier, and that he disposed of bodies in locations beyond the Gilgo Beach sort of area. He has been charged with her murder, and this came almost a year after his initial arrest. There are 3 victims that I believe haven't been identified. So please note some of these victims have yet to have justice brought to them. But the partial remains of a Karen Vertega are discovered on Fire Island, a barrier beach off Long Island's southern coast. Her remains would actually be unknown. Her name would be unknown until 2022, when DNA analysis helped them with that identification. Her last contact with her family was Valentine's Day in 1996, and other parts of her body were actually found in 2011. This is what I was actually able to find on a page about Karen. Karen's life was taken from her in 1996, and it took 27 years to identify her. She is believed to be one of the possible victims of the Gilgo Beach serial killer, possibly one of the first. Investigators have identified a seventh victim known as investigators have identified a 7th victim known as Jane Doe 7 in the Gilgo Beach murders. She's now known as Karen Vertega, 34, who went missing in 1996. Authorities from Suffolk County, New York, identified the victim at a press conference on a Friday. They said Karen lived in Manhattan and worked as an escort, and unfortunately, she'd actually never been reported missing. So this is, whilst Rex has not been charged with her murder, she is widely known as one of the. She is known as one of the victims. I'm guessing they just don't have the evidence to charge him as of yet. So sadly, next I'm going to be talking about a victim who's yet to be identified. She has the nickname Peaches due to a tattoo found on her body. Probably one of the saddest things that I've actually read is that the remains of a toddler named Baby Doe belongs to Peaches. I truly hope that one day they can both be identified either through DNA or any which way that they can be identified, so that her family can be brought some type of justice, because neither Karen nor Peaches or Baby Doe have ever been named in charges against him, but it's largely speculated that they are actually victims of him. So our next victim is Valerie Mack. She was went by an alias of the name Melissa Taylor, and at 24 years old, she's living in Philadelphia and working as an escort when she disappeared at some point in the year 2000. Like many of our victims, though, she was petite. She stood at about 5 or so feet, which is about 1.5 meters, and she weighed around 100 pounds, which is about 45 kilos. She'd been in foster care from a really young age and was never reported missing as well. She happened to be the mother, though, of a son. Her partial remains, though, were discovered in Manorville, New York in November 2000. She wasn't identified till 2020. Her torso was actually found wrapped in garbage bags and dumped near the woods near the intersection of Halsey Manor Road and Mill Road, which is adjacent to a set of power lines and a nearby power line access road. A right foot and hands were found on April 4th in 2011, and they were the first determined to have belonged to an unidentified victim, Jane Doe number 6, but that was actually found to be Valerie Mack's remains. On May 28th in 2020, the police did announce that they had identified those remains as Valerie Mack. She had been last seen by family members in the spring of 2000, and that happened to be somewhere near Port Republic in New Jersey. So on December 17th last year, 2024, Rex was indicted for her murder by the Suffolk District County's office. Our next victim is Jessica Taylor, and she was living in Manhattan when she went missing on July 21st in 2003. On July 26, 2003, her torso was discovered about 45 miles, which is about 72 kilometers east of Gilgo Beach in Manorvale, New York as well. And she was identified by DNA later that year. Her torso was found on top of a scrap wood at the end of a paved crossroad on Halsey Manor Road, just north of where the Long Island Expressway is. There was some plastic sheeting that was found underneath her torso, and a tattoo on her body had actually been mutilated, which I suspect was to make sure that they couldn't identify her, but I can't be sure. Further remains of Jessica's were found in March 2011. That happened to be her skull, her hands, and her forearm. She worked in Washington, D.C. and Manhattan as an escort. She was last seen working around the Port Authority bus area between July 18th and 22nd, 2003. Now, so Rex was actually charged with her murder at the same time as Sandra's. Somewhere in there, and I do apologize, I think I've actually forgotten to mention it, there is an Asian doe in there, and there is an Asian man that has been discovered. So up on the timeline that you've seen a couple of times now, guys, you can actually see that he is yet to be identified, and he is suspected to be also a victim of the Long Island serial killer. So you can see that they're trying to align a lot of the victims to this serial killer. What I might add, though, at the time, guys, there is, I think, at least 2 or 3 other active serial killers. I think one of them was John Britton, and Joel Rifkin might have even been active at the same time. So you've got to understand this is very similar to when we've had circumstances like in Southern California, where there can be up to 5 serial killers in the area. So I think we're sort of seeing that again. And I think the victims definitely deserve to be heard and have justice brought to them, but I also don't want it rushed. And like, in a way, it just feels like, are you just trying to align the victims? But it definitely not in most of them, because the DNA is matched Rex, and that is definitely confirmed. But it is a little bit, it is a little bit, hang on, are we doing a bit sketch? Getting back to Jessica, though, I did find this on a website and would like to really share it because I really do think it's really quite beautiful. Jessica was a person who was a true force. Everyone who knew her loved her. She was described as a beautiful person with a big heart. Her family remember her as a young woman who loved to sing, play board games, and make people laugh. Her cousin Jasmine cherishes memories of dancing, drawing, jumping rope, and having sleepovers with Jessica. She wished she had the opportunity to make more memories. Now, friends of Jessica's have also stated that she had a little bit of a feisty streak and she would actually stand up for herself when necessary. And she didn't take easily to disrespect. Her smile was one that lit up on her face, gleaming through her wonderful and beautiful eyes. Jessica was incredibly loving and she's terribly missed. It is so sad that she lost her life. I can sort of relate to Jessica in the respect of I've got a really, really feisty streak. I possibly won't stand up for myself as much as I would probably stand up for a family member or someone that I love or just family and friends. It's actually something my sister and I have very much in common. We're loyal to a fault, but we can't stand up for ourselves to save our lives. Hopefully it's something eventually we are able to do. But our next victim is Maureen Brainard Barnes of Norwich, Connecticut. She left her home around July 12th in 2007, and she was letting her family know that she was going to New York for the day. She was last seen in Manhattan, and then she suddenly disappeared without a trace. So at the age of 25, she'd experienced a lot of hardship already in her life. She'd previously had several injuries, including a fractured nose, broken fingers on her right hand. She had scars, including one on her forehead. She also had a scar on her abdomen from her C-section, along with tattoos, including the name Nicolette in pink letters and images of lilies and a rose. And she was only 4'11" and she weighed 105 pounds, so she's tiny. Maureen was known for her freckles and glasses. Friends would remember her as extremely trusting and that she was a devoted mother. And unfortunately, her efforts to support her daughter and misplaced trust would probably lead to her actual death and her body being found in late 2010. So I think that's definitely where we're seeing a pattern here that this man has enticed them in one way or another, whether it was through work or anything like that, that he's enticing them and he is killing them, and he's using the fact that they are escorts or sex workers. Our next victim is Melissa Bartholomew. Melissa was 24. She grew up in Buffalo, New York, before she would move to New York City and get a job as a dancer. Now, she graduated from Buffalo's South Park High School in 2003, and she would get her cosmetology license from Continental Beauty School. She worked at Supercuts in her hometown before she relocated to the city. She wanted to pursue a job as a stylist, and she wanted to actually own her own hair salon. Her parents were really quite worried when she moved away. They believed that their petite daughter, she's only 4'11", she's 95 pounds. They believed she could handle herself, but they advised her to be really careful and would hope for the best. She rented a $700 basement apartment in Tremont, which is in the Bronx. She told her parents that she was working in cosmetology, but her landlady, Bella, knew that her tenant she knew that she'd actually taken up a job as a stripper. In line with that, she ended up actually falling into the work as an escort, and eventually she would advertise her services through Craigslist. Bella, and her husband, remembered her as a sweet girl and a really good tenant who never brought boyfriends, and then she never brought clients home. In July 2009, Bella, her landlord, was actually quite alarmed because Melissa's cats were meowing and scratching at her door, and that was when they sort of realised she'd actually gone missing. Melissa ended up sending a late night text message to her sister, Amanda Funderburg. Now, her sister was only 15, but the only member of her family that actually knew she was working as an escort, because at that stage, the family only believed that she was involved in exotic dancing and doing haircuts. The text was the last time the family had actually ended up communicating with her. Early the next day, she would deposit $900 into her bank account. She attempted to call her ex-boyfriend and he didn't answer. She also ended up she checked her voicemail from 2 motels in Massapequa and a Budget Inn and a Budget Western. So if you remember, that's where Rex actually lived. So within 24 hours of her going missing, though, the family tried to report her, but the NYPD ended up dismissing their concerns. And a few days later, it was a family friend who urged them to go to the Erie County's Sheriff's Office to pressure the NYPD into actually putting a missing persons report. NYPD ended up finally opening up a missing persons file and began coordinating with Long Island. Now, Amanda, that incredibly young 15-year-old sister, started to receive some really disgusting calls in July from an unknown man using her missing sister's phone. He taunted her. He was claiming that her sister was a prostitute and she was rotting in his closet or basement or something. The NYPD would trace the calls to busy areas like Madison Square Garden, Times Square, suggesting that the caller knew it would be really hard to pinpoint that location. Detectives rushed to the scene each time, but they couldn't find him. It raised speculation that he may have had some type of law enforcement background. Now, investigators ended up finding a second phone belonging to Melissa with a convicted felon. He said that he got it during a scuffle, or he found it. The second phone ended up leading to nowhere. It showing Melissa's picture at motels in Manhattan and Long Island. It didn't pursue any new leads. A psychic that had been hired by the family claimed Melissa was in a shallow grave near the ocean in a place starting with G. So that psychic, whether I don't know, I'm a little bit of a skeptic when it comes to that stuff, but it certainly was pretty pinpoint considering she was found in Gilgo Beach. In December 2010, Suffolk County Police found Melissa and the others on Gilgo Beach. DNA from a toothbrush found in her basement would actually help identify her. Family and friends gathered at Life Church in West Seneca in New York to remember her, while police continued to search for her killer during that time. Now, next, we've got the incredible Shannon Gilbert, a 24-year-old Craigslist escort, and she's an aspiring actress at the same time. She disappeared on May 1st in 2010. She was last seen at the in Oak Beach, which is right near Gilgo Beach. Early that morning, one of the neighbors, who happened to be Gustav, he's hearing someone screaming for help at his door. He's trying to kill me. The person actually, so Shannon actually fled before he could call the police. Minutes later, an SUV driver arrived saying he was looking for a young woman who'd actually run away from his party. Now, Joseph Brewer, the party host, admitted he'd argued with Shannon he admitted to arranging the appointment with Shannon through Craigslist. He told the police she'd left his house in hysterics and vanished into the night. He's a former financial advisor. He told the New York Daily News that he believed Shannon was still alive and just couldn't have just disappeared into thin air. He describes his involvement in the case as a surreal nightmare. He's moved away from his Oak Beach home to his mother's home with his daughter and into his mother's house with his daughter and mum. His family owns a number of rental properties across Suffolk County. It's the disappearance of Shannon that would actually lead to the police finding those 4 bodies at Gilgo Beach. Unfortunately, though, Shannon wouldn't be found for almost 19 months after she disappeared. She'd actually be found in December 2011. Now, her remains were located in Oak Beach, which is where she disappeared from, 19 months after her disappearance. The cause of her death was contested. Her body was found in a marsh about half a mile from where she'd actually disappeared. Now, a week earlier, some of her clothing and her belongings had been discovered in that sort of vicinity in that area. She was last seen banging on a door of one of the neighbours and screaming for help before running off into the night. Shannon would make an emergency 911 call that night, saying that she was fearing for her life. Now, the police have stated that the death of Shannon, whose disappearance did trigger the search, which led to all those bodies being found, was due to drowning and is likely unrelated to the Long Island serial killer case. I don't believe this because I believe she was found with her pants down. I don't think if you're running for your life, your pants are going to be off. So, but Shannon's mum, Mari, she advocated massively for her daughter, and she was saying that she'd been murdered by this serial killer, and she blamed a lot of the police inaction for not identifying it sooner. Mari Gilbert was actually killed in 2016 by her other daughter, Sarah Gilbert, who was convicted in 2017 and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Sarah has long suffered from severe mental illness. This is the part that really probably, I have to say, of this podcast, it's probably pissed me off the most. This young woman rang the police. She's saying, I'm fearing for my life. Something's going on. This Joseph Brewer, or whatever his name is, Mr. Brewer, has nonchalantly said, no, she was just a hysterical woman and she, nothing, don't worry about it, coppers and all that kind of stuff. Now, to be fair, I understand that some police officers in that police department, I'm sure, were absolutely fabulous. So I'm not saying that they're not. But by God, oh God, there were a lot of you that were crap. There were a lot of you that sat there on your asses and did nothing about these missing girls and did nothing about sex workers, said that they were young girls who were in a high-risk environment job and this is just the breaks of your job and blah, blah, blah. Oh, my God. What are you even thinking, saying crap like that in this day and age? We're not talking like in the 1970s and 1980s. No, not that that was any better. We're talking about in the 2000s, guys. We're talking about in a time where a lot of this stuff is out there. And by the way, I'm sorry, isn't OnlyFans these days like the new thing to do? So I'm sorry. It's okay for Denise Richards to do it, but an 18-year-old or a 25-year-old girl now, is she just going to be called some sex worker and she's working in a high-risk environment? And I'm sorry to bring Denise Richards into that. That's appalling. But at the same time, come on, guys. Oh, it just makes me mad. So sorry. Went off on my little tangent. Went off on my little high horse. So our next victim is Megan Waterman. Now, she's just off the Long Island Expressway, the deserted semi-industrial area of a Holiday Inn. Certainly not the type of place I'd be wanting to walk around alone at night, but that's what our surveillance footage ended up showing that Megan was said to have been doing in June 2010. She left around 1:30 and it's on foot. She was raised in Scarborough, Maine. She appeared to have checked in alone. However, it's been reported that she was visiting Long Island with her boyfriend, Akeem Cruz. She undertook a 6-hour bus ride journey from Portland, Maine to New York City and then to Long Island shortly after Memorial Day. Cruz, he lives in Brooklyn. He accompanied her at least quite a few different times around New York. She's a single mother. She worked a number of different jobs, sandwich shops, scraping together a living. She met her boyfriend in a bar at some point in 2009. They started dating, and he allegedly shared that it would be better for her and her child if she perhaps became an escort, because that's a better way to raise money. He reportedly was the one who introduced her to advertising her services on Craigslist. Her mum, though, alleged that actually Cruz was her pimp. He would end up saying that Megan was using Craigslist to sell herself and sell her body. In June, she ended up making an appointment with some guy in Long Island. She checked She checked in without Cruz. He would actually later tell authorities that he spoke to her around 8 or 9 p.m. on June 5th, and then spoke to her later that night on June 6th around 1:30. She usually called her mother 3 times a day to check in on her daughter, Liliana. So the last call that she ever received was at 9:50 on June 5th. I found this online about Megan, and I would love to share it. Megan was a loving and devoted mother, daughter, granddaughter, and sister. She loved music, dancing, beaches, and spending time with the love of her life, her daughter Lily, with whom she spent time doing things such as reading stories together, watching movies, playing games, and just snuggling. Megan always put her family first and all else next. She is survived by her daughter Lily, her mum Lorraine, her grandparents Muriel Benner and Douglas Osgott, her father Gregory Gove and her family, her brother Gregory, her sisters Ellie, Stephanie, Bethany, and Amanda, her aunts Catherine, Elizabeth, Ella of the Portland area, and Julie of New Hampshire, and her uncles Eli of Michigan, and Gary of Standish. Megan is also survived by her extended family, cousins, nieces, nephews, and countless friends. She will be remembered as a loving and vivacious and caring person by everyone who knew her. All these girls, they have such amazing things said about them. It is absolutely insane how much they are loved. So we've got Amber Lynn Costello. She's 27. She was last seen in North Babylon, New York on September 2nd in 2010. No one even reported her missing before she was found on Gilgo Beach. Her sister, Kimberly Overstreet, had helped Amber actually move into rehab just a year before. She said that she was working, her sister actually mentioned that she'd been working previously as a prostitute in Florida, and she told reporters that she had hopes her sister's sad tale would serve as a warning for other people who were thinking to use easy money in the sex trade. Again, like most of the other identified victims, she was petite, just 4'10" and 100 pounds. She actually grew up in Wilmington, North Carolina, and apparently she possibly started her sex work industry there. But it was around 2006 that she moved to Florida. It was even during her darkest days there, she was active in her local church. She would often attend church, so she had quite a number of friends there. Some of the friends from the church actually knew that she had been an escort, but they would always remember her as very kind and a very loving friend. She still sang in the choir. She helped at a nursery in another church that she actually attended. And she was trying to find her way out of the sex industry. So she was trying her hand at waiting tables on a diner, but she really, really struggled. They would actually... So at some point, some police arrested her on suspicion of shoplifting toothpaste and other items from the public supermarket in 2009. It was there that she actually told cops that she was a librarian. At some point in her life, she was married to a gentleman by the name of Donald Costello, and their address was listed in Florida, and it matches an address listed for private Playmates escort referrals. So, and she'd also been married previously to that to Michael Wilhelm from North Carolina. They met while she was living in Wilmington, and he says he left her because, unfortunately, of her heroin use. She was genuinely trying to kick her drug habit, and she was trying to leave her life out of the sex work industry. She just didn't really get to do it in time. So on a bright, warm day, Gilgo Beach is probably one of the loveliest spots, they say, and part of a narrow barrier island between the Atlantic Ocean and the Great South Bay. It's a little bit it's a little bit quieter near Jones Beach. That's where police would end up finding 4 bodies in December 2010. And one of the nastiest winters, I'm told, in New York and had ever seen in years, forced them to really restrict this search. But they would definitely resume the full search in late March the following year in 2011, where more bodies would be found. Now, all of this police searching and all that kind of stuff, this was all sparked by Shannan going missing. So you really have to almost feel for her, because she is the reason that these women have been found. And it's so sad, but such an incredibly brave woman ringing 911 is the reason these women were found. So they found the first dead woman that a canine actually and his officer, so a canine sector officer and his cadaver dog located what would turn out to be not the woman they'd been searching for, who had been Shannon Gilbert, but it would actually be the 4 bodies. So we're going to go with 2011 till 2022. There's not much done investigation-wise into the Long Island serial killer. It's definitely something that had plagued their department, but they went through a lot themselves during this period of time. There was massive amounts of police corruption. If you get a chance, go and watch Gone Girls on Netflix, because it sort of goes a little bit into more depth of how one of the police chiefs who had actually been assigned the police commissioner, he was one of the most corrupt guys on the planet. I even think I suspected him when I watched one of the documentaries previously to Rex being arrested. So there's a lot to it. But in January 2022, the Suffolk County District Attorney, he ends up pulling together a new task force to investigate these murders. In 2023, they would arrest Rex and charge him with the murders, and over a period of from July 2023 to December 2024, he's charged with 7 murders. Now, there was quite a number of witnesses that called out his car, called out even the way he looked. It was just insane. His wife still suspects, even though she's divorced him, still suspects he's not actually the killer. Don't know how. He's got 2 kids. It's, as I said, I don't want to really give it too much airtime because there's more probably to this story. And I think that what I really wanted to highlight this time was those girls deserved a hell of a lot more than they ever got from the police officers of Suffolk County. But I really, really enjoyed doing this episode, guys. It was really good. And look, I probably will do a follow-up episode on Rex and talk about him a little bit more, get a little bit more on his bio. But for now, I just wanted to talk about those victims. So thank you all for listening to this week's podcast. If you like this podcast, please hit that like button for the video, hit that subscribe button, go and watch those 30 odd episodes. There is so much to see, guys. Otherwise, guys, to anyone new or old, have an absolutely fabulous weekend, my fellow peanuts. See you later. Bye.